Good afternoon. I'm Leon Davis, and thank you for stopping by. This morning, I went to a community meeting. This is the first community meeting I had been to. Shame on me, but I'm glad I did go by. It was an interesting adventure, and I did take footage. I got out of the meeting too late to put it together for a show for today, so that'll be next week. And with that, let's make things begin. Welcome to Altitude Adjustment. So today I want to talk about net neutrality. A lot of people, well, some people have expressed concerns that they don't understand net neutrality and what it means to them. So I'm just going to take a few moments to talk a little bit about net neutrality. I've been in technology for, I want to say 30 years. Probably about 30 years, maybe 20, 25, something like that. I think the first time I dealt with it was in college, my first year, 76, 77, 76. And my first experience was working with the old punch cards. I had to create a program. I had to take a COBOL class. And I created a program, and it used the old punch cards, and you punch out what you wanted to punch out instructions, and then you'd run it through, and then the computer would execute your program. And I created a game. But then after that I did some other things, but then got back into it, and I think since 87 I have worked consistently, or 85 I've worked. That has been the source of income for me. So the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about how the internet came about, and then we'll address some of the things associated with net neutrality. On October the 4th in 1957, the Soviet Union launched the world's first man-made satellite into orbit, and it was called the Sputnik. It was a beach ball sized satellite with 4 antennae that sent out a radio signal that even an amateur radio enthusiast could pick up. But because it was during the Cold War, that started a new political, military, technological, and scientific developments in the United States. Schools started adding courses like chemistry, physics, and calculus. Corporations took government grants and invested in science research and development. And the federal government formed new agencies such as the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, and the Department of Defense's Advanced Research Project, or ARPA. Their goal was to design and develop space-age technologies such as rockets, weapons, and computers. The U.S. military was concerned that the Russians could knock out the phone systems, thereby eliminating communications, so they set out to solve the problem and identify a new alternative communication source if that should happen. In 1962, a scientist from MIT and ARPA, and I'm not sure if that is one and the same, how they worded it, it could be explained differently, and I didn't have an opportunity to continue to research that. But a scientist proposed a gigantic network of computers that can talk to one another. The network would be able to would enable the government leaders to communicate even if the Soviets destroyed the telephone system. And the way the computer system would do that is it was designed to, if one computer goes down, or if a section of computers go down, it would still route network traffic so that other computers would still get that information. So in other words, if you knocked out part of the system, the whole system wasn't crippled. In 1962, a scientist, or I'm sorry, I went over that. In 1969, ARPANET, as it was called, had 2 computers one in a research lab in UCLA and one at Stanford. And the message login was attempted to be sent from one computer to the other. The network crashed, and only the LO was received by Stanford. By the end of 1969, there were 4 computers connected to ARPANET, and it just grew from there. One other moment of note: in 1991, a Swedish programmer introduced HTML, or hypertext markup language, which is the foundation for building web pages. So most people who design web pages know HTML. Most of what you see when you go out and surf is built on HTML, and that started in 1991. The early days of the internet consisted of universities and research facilities, and then in the 90s, internet service providers started showing up, and they started building their networks, and it would attach to this previous network, which is now called the backbone. But AT&T, NetZero, AOL, all of the ISPs during that time built out additional networks and then connected to that network, which is where we have the internet now. So now it's global. In the early days, there were some collaboration with research facilities in Europe and in the UK. I talk about, so one of the things I wanted to point out is no one owns the internet at this particular point. No one can say the internet belongs to us. So companies don't own the internet. What they're charging you for is they're charging you for access to the internet. They're charging you for when they build out their networks, they have to design it to be able to carry so much data and use protocols that are consistent with all network traffic in order for them to route your traffic to another computer network. So a web page, and I think most people know this, can be on a computer in Russia or a computer in France or anywhere, and as long as you're connected to that network, you're able to access that web page. Some of the basic facts about the internet here in the United States: more than 10.6 million US households have no access to wired servers with download speeds of at least 25 megabytes. And 25 megabytes is the threshold that the government has set for high-speed internet. An additional 46.1 million households live in areas with just one provider offering those speeds. And new analysis has found that adds up to more than 56 million households lacking any high-speed broadband choice over wired connections. 10% of all Americans, that's 34 million, lack access to 25 or more. And then of that 10%, or 39% in rural areas, that's 23 million people lack access to high-speed internet. I don't know how when you got into internet, but a lot of us who've been around the internet for a while remember the old dial-up. You had to dial up with a modem, and you'd connect it to your computer. I actually ran in the early days, bulletin boards were extremely popular. What a bulletin board was is that you'd connect, and a lot of times they didn't even offer internet access. You just dial up, connect to that modem. You could read messages. It was like a blog. You could read messages and post a post, and then the next time you log in, you'd see a reply to your post, and you'd have an opportunity to interact. So I even ran a bulletin board for a while. And then internet access started becoming much more popular, and bulletin boards started to fall out of favor because there were so many other things to do. 66% of Americans living in U.S. territories, or 2.6 million people, lack high-speed internet access. That's 25 megabytes or greater. And Americans living in rural and urban areas adopt broadband at similar rates. I skipped over a point. 98% of those living in rural territory areas, or 1.1 million people, lack access completely. Americans living in rural and urban areas adopt broadband at similar rates, adopt high-speed broadband at similar rates. That's 20%, 28% in rural areas and 30% in urban areas where they have access to high-speed internet. So the internet, I don't even have to explain how important the internet has become. It's an opportunity to do your banking, information, track down where you had to go to the library before, or where the information wasn't available, or you had to make a phone call. A lot of times that information is available online, and it's really easy to get to. And because of broadband, whereas before you had to connect to the internet, most people are connected 24 hours a day. So you just sit down at your computer and start surfing. You don't have to do anything to connect. You don't have to put in any particular password other than your password for your operating system. But before, you used to have an internet account, and you logged in with a user ID and password. So now we're at the point where adoption of high-speed internet is becoming more widespread. As something becomes more popular, people look for ways to make money. A lot of times businesses are started on the internet, and case in point, Altitude Adjustment is a podcast. I am a business. I am attempting to use this to make money. Actually, I want to build something more than just making money. I want to build something. I want to be able to hire people to work, to give them an opportunity to fulfill their dreams. So as the internet grows, the opportunity to be successful and make money becomes greater. So the concern with net neutrality is internet service providers, those who built those networks, control the traffic that goes over their networks. And by controlling that traffic, they can block my podcast, or they could slow down my podcast to the point of where it becomes unpleasurable to try to watch it. And that is the concern with net neutrality. It is the people who are fighting for net neutrality want to ensure not that internet service providers are doing that yet, but the potential for them selecting winners and losers across the internet is great. Now, I ran across this commercial. It's actually a Burger King commercial, which I thought was really good, actually. And it in a kind of in a simplistic way showed what net neutrality was. So I'm going to play that for you, and then I'll be right back. There was.
With net neutrality, you know, some people, for what it's worth, just, you know?
I don't know exactly what it is.
Got a number one, Hey, how you doing?
Do you know what number 98, what's going on with it?
Number 98, you got the Whopper?
Yeah.
So you got the slow access Whopper pass?
Wait, what?
It's on the menu right there with the fast, medium, and slow.
Slow MBPS, fast MBPS, or hyper fast MBPS. MBPS, of course, standing for making burgers per second.
So if we want a Whopper now, we have to pay $26?
Well, that's how you get it fast. That's the highest priority.
This is like a lane system?
Maybe like 15, yeah, fast lane, slow lane. So like maybe like 15, 20 minutes.
What are you talking about?
Burger King Corporation believes that they can sell more and make more money selling like chicken sandwiches and chicken fries, so now they're slowing down the access to the Whopper.
Were you given an option of a chicken sandwich or?
Yeah, I don't want a chicken sandwich, Robert. I want a Whopper.
Do you have any Whoppers ready that aren't?
Yeah.
The sandwich is ready. I'm just not allowed to actually get it to you.
What? You can't give me the sandwich? It's ready, but you can't give it to me?
Whopper neutrality was repealed. They voted on it.
Whopper what? This doesn't make any sense.
Fortunately, I have no other choice.
Oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever heard of.
See, like he got the fast, and now he's getting his.
Are you kidding me? You paid $26 for a Whopper?
Yeah, he ordered it. Now he's a higher priority. So.
Come on, guys, like I want a burger, man.
If you'd like,
this is a bad dream right now. I just want a burger, brother, a burger.
You want
I feel like I'm going insane. This is crazy.
Here's what I'll do. You have the bag, and I can put it in the bag in 42 seconds. Hold on, 10 seconds. We don't make the rules.
You just enforce these ridiculous rules?
Fortunately, we have to.
Come on.
I felt like I was being taken advantage of in a sense. Just as a customer coming in to get their food, it felt like a power move.
They already changed the policies overnight or whatever.
I didn't think that ordering a Whopper would really open my eyes up to net neutrality.
The Whopper actually taught me about net neutrality. It's stupid, but true.
Okay, so I thought that was a clever way of presenting net neutrality and a very simplistic way, but effective. The concern is that when you have a monopoly or when you have a near monopoly, sometimes you take liberties because even though you may tick off your customer, where can they go? They can't go anywhere else. You're the only provider for that service or product, and they have to come to you. So you can change the price to whatever you feel that you want to make. If you decide, if you had some bad losses someplace else, you can decide to make it up on your current customers. One of the things that I have a problem with is currently you'll find companies that offer deals to new customers because they want to bring in new customers, but they forget completely about the customers that provided everything for them, that made it possible for them to be in business. And that's another subject altogether, but it shows the mindset of companies that they're willing to ignore or tick off or do whatever to make money and assume that you're going to eventually forgive them and forget. So there are a couple of ideas that, or I'm going to say a couple, it has been proposed, and Barack Obama did in his term classify internet service providers as a utility, and then that was undone under the current administration. So I want to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of utility versus non-utility, and I think that's the real net neutrality discussion. Is the internet a necessary part of our lives, or has it reached that point, or is it going to reach that point? And if so, do we put it in the hands of private industry, or do we regulate it so that we can control how it's maintained? So for the utility designation, the FCC has planned to, well, okay. According to a 2015 report by the American Consumer Satisfaction Index, 61% of U.S. households have neither one or zero choices when it comes to high-speed broadband services. That's across the country. As it stands, there's no incentive for the cable companies to not only expand far beyond the metropolitan areas where they are, it doesn't make fiscal sense to go much further, which is why 43% of rural California residents have no broadband access. Let's see. So against the utility designation, well, when Obama made the designation as a utility, he didn't go, most utilities are rate controlled, and part of the classifying a service as a utility is the paperwork, monitoring. What Obama did was he proposed the reclassification to a utility and imposed net neutrality only for the net neutrality rules, basically saying ISPs cannot throttle, give preferential treatment to certain applications and websites, but left the aspect of that they can control their networks, that their rates would be based on their own, they would be able to set the rates for what they charged customers, but the FCC or the government would be able to request from them that information stating that they weren't throttling, making sure, being able to check on them that they didn't change or start doing things that were unsavory as far as favoring particular content. And you may have remembered a discussion where one ISP wanted to charge Netflix more for faster speed. So it's not that private industry wouldn't try that. Phone companies, cell phone companies have tried to exclude certain apps from your data plan. That is basically what net neutrality is against, is that all apps, so if a phone company or an ISP has a content company that they're particularly behind and they want to be successful, they may give you breaks, they may change speeds, they may give you breaks on your data so that they can excel at the expense of other people. And that's what net neutrality is really about. It's about not allowing anyone to get an advantage based on the ISP's ability to deliver content to you. One example of what happened was the first internet browser was Netscape, and it was a collaboration with students and research folks, and it was a free browser. I don't think anybody's ever had to pay for a browser, and there might have been a time when browsers were for sale. But Microsoft, being the dominant operating system on the desktop, had a browser that they wanted to be successful, so they gave it away with the operating system. And because they had a near monopoly on the desktop, they made it easier for you to use their browser and made it difficult for you to use any other browser, which meant that their browser became more popular. What net neutrality believers is, they don't want to see that occur again, especially with network traffic. They don't want someone to use their position as an internet service provider to make somebody else successful, their partners, somebody that's giving them money or helping them make more money, and stopping others from being able to compete fairly. So that's basically what net neutrality is. Hopefully I have not stumbled over everything so much to the point of where it doesn't make sense, but it takes you being active. If you believe in net neutrality, if you're a believer in net neutrality and you think that all traffic should be treated fairly and created equal, then there are steps that you need to take. Not everyone believes that all traffic should be created equally. They believe that some traffic should be given preferential treatment, and these are not ISPs. They believe that because the internet service providers built a network, that they should be able to control the network any way that they see fit. That they should be able to, if you're consuming a particular product that the company disagrees with, and that's one of the things that I think we do in this society, is we hold companies responsible for controlling people's behavior. So some people are going to believe that they can put pressure on internet service providers to control the content that is being transferred across the internet. And again, what happens then is somebody picks winners and losers. Hopefully you have enough information to at least be interested in finding out more about how net neutrality is going to impact you. You may decide to go back to school. You may decide to, and I had a conversation recently with some friends, and we talked about if information is available for me online, why would I go to college, or why would I go to a school and have them pay me, or have me pay them to teach me what I could find out on the internet all by myself? The difficulty comes here is, in a world where net neutrality does not exist, the local colleges could put pressure on internet service providers to make online learning sites more difficult. That way you won't be interested in using an online learning tool, and that you'll go to the university and pay whatever fees they want from you in order for you to learn what it is you want to learn. So that's some of the concerns by people who believe in net neutrality, and that's why it's important. So at this point, I have to say there was so much information. There was so much information in putting this together. There's offshoots of this, of networks and high-speed internet and how it's delivered. I didn't even talk about competition and what competition does for the price of internet. One of the things, and I'll mention this quickly and I'll be done. It showed that AT&T, well, maybe I'll leave the names out. One internet service provider charged $100 for a particular speed of internet. They were the only ones that were able to deliver that speed of internet in that particular market, and they charged $100. In another market similar to that one, same size, the company had competition, and for an internet connection of that first market speed, rather than $100, it was only $70, and both companies charged about $70. The competition brought the cost down, because if the first company had charged what they charged in the previous market, they would have been undercut. But if they could have made it on the lower cost, how do they justify charging the other market $100? So much of internet delivery is one company, and that is an additional concern with net neutrality, which is one of the reasons. And some people say, well, there's lots of competition, but the numbers don't bear that out. So anyway, that wraps up things for today. Next week, as I mentioned, I went to the community event. It was an eye-opening experience. I kind of understood what I expected, but things, probably nothing there that's gonna, no super out of the way things happened. It was just people talking about their concerns. But being the first one that I'd been to, it was really great to see people participating, and how much they cared about their community, and that's always good to see. So anyway, as I wrap up this week, I want to remind you that the goal of the podcast is to be ad supported, and right now I'm not large enough to be ad supported. So your subscriptions will help towards that. Please go to YouTube and subscribe. Make sure you like, share, try to help me build an audience. If you believe things are going in a way that you enjoy them, make sure you make comments, start a discussion. My podcast can be replayed. This podcast can be replayed on YouTube, and it's available on audio on Stitcher, podcast.com, iTunes, in the iTunes store, the Google Music Play Store, and other places. Go to the website for more information on how you can listen to the podcast. Make sure you like and share. As always, be cool, be calm, and above all, be careful. Look out for the other guy, because they may not be looking out for you.